Hi, good evening. So you sold a snake and now we got to ship it. So how do we make sure that our shipping box doesn't turn into a casket? Alright, so first thing when we're shipping, you have to pick a company. And I'm not here to tell you what company to use. People have very strong feelings on which company to use. There's 4 main companies. You got Morph Market, Redline, Reptiles to You, and Ship Your Reptiles. I've used them all. The new rule now is whichever company you decide to ship with, you have to use their box. So currently right now I'm shipping with Morph Market just for the ease of use right now, right? They got a lot of one-click features. So I have to use a Morph Market box. Before it used to be like that. So if you're watching old YouTube videos, you'll see people using Ship Your Reptile boxes or Reptile to You boxes and then shipping with Redline or vice versa. I used to love the Reptiles to You boxes and the Ship Your Reptile boxes, right? I think they were made very well, and at the time they used to have the best price for boxes in bulk. But now, whatever company you decide to go with is your choice. Do what's best for you. Make sure you're using their box. You don't have to use the inner supplies, which you'll see I have supplies from different companies, and we'll get into that why. Alright, so when you first get your box, the first thing we're going to have to do is pick the appropriate size, right? So I like to use the 8x8x7s and usually the 12x9x6s. Those are usually the only 2 boxes I use. They do have a 7x7, they do have bigger ones, but I don't really ship anything that goes in anything more than a 12x9x6. That's usually pretty good all the way up for your ready to breed females, right? I use 8x8x7s for juveniles and down, right? This is what I'm going to put my hatchlings in. I think this is the best box for them. Alright, the first thing we do is put our box together, and while we're doing that, we're going to fast forward a lot of this, but I just want to show you one thing. The first thing I do is I tape my bottom, but I want to show you something real quick before we put our box together. We're going to put air holes in this box, okay? And that's going to be a main point of discussion for me in this video, and something that I really want to try to drive home, and hopefully I can say it right. Some people don't use boxes because they say boxes are breathable, okay? So they believe that this portion of the box is kind of permeable, that it can exchange oxygen and CO2 from just the cardboard itself. That's partially true. That's not 100% in context, right? A lot of people, boxes are breathable because look, when you put it together, you see how there's holes everywhere. And if you look down in there, it's a breathable box. That's why, right? However, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to seal all that up with tape, right? So you see, you got these holes in the bottom. Can you get that, babe?
Right there, yeah.
Right. So that's why people say the boxes are breathable. It's because by design, when you put your box together, it's always going to have these holes and gaps. Every fold, right? That's the design of a box. However, when you're putting a live animal in here, the first thing that's important is the security of the animal. Right? So when we tape it, we're taping it because we don't want our animal to fall out. It has to maintain the weight. So now what I've done essentially is covered the air holes there. But because I'm shipping an animal and I don't want my box to open, because we all know how FedEx and the shipping companies, right? It's going to have a long trip. This box is going to be stacked on top of other boxes. You don't know if it's going to be the bottom box, the top box, the middle box. It's going to get moved from a truck to a plane, back to a plane, back to a truck. It's going to go all over the place. So we seal up all our sides. And I usually do like 2 pieces of tape on each side. I'm probably a little excessive. I do 2 down the middle, 2 on each of my sides, and then after I put my sides, I put 1 more down the middle. But now you see all those breathable holes? Now we've just covered them with tape. So even if you want to have the discussion about what brand of tape can breathe and which brand can't, I don't think it's really worth the conversation, right? It's obviously going to have less CO2 and O2 exchange regardless of whether we're going to claim our tape is breathable. Plus, now on the bottom, what are we gonna do? We're gonna put a big piece of styrofoam in there. Right? Alright, so you have your bottom piece and you have your 4 pieces. It's just like a little puzzle.
Go ahead.
Alright, after we put our box together, this is the main thing. Whether you're using a heat pack or not, all 4 shipping companies agree on one thing. That the guideline / standard, because that's what they're called when you go to any of their FAQ pages. It says guideline / standards, right? It's that you place a 1/4 hole on all sides of the box, right? Every single shipping company, they agree. Morph Market, Redline, Reptiles to You, and Ship Your Reptiles. So, regardless of which company you use, they all say to put a hole in it, right? And you can just use a screwdriver. I use a star tip, Phillips, whatever you want to call it, and just poke through. And you make sure that you're going all the way through. That didn't take that long, right? So I get, we say, oh, we're not going to put holes in our box because it's not efficient if you're shipping at scale. I get it. I'm a small breeder, right? Like tomorrow I'm only sending out 2 snakes. So I get that big breeders who don't put holes in their boxes, which is fairly common because the last 4 snakes I've received came in without holes in the box and they weren't cheap snakes. And they were all from well-known breeders, right? So I guess the argument could be, and the stance could be, 1, there's not enough data to say that you have to have the holes. And because it's a guideline and a standard and it's not enforced by the shipping company, it's not a requirement, right? So that is one school. I believe that you should just have the holes in there. It doesn't hurt nothing and it's better for the animal. Especially if you're going to use a heat pack. The heat pack is obviously going to work better with the holes in it because it requires more oxygen, right? So it's going to take the oxygen and the CO2 and then it's going to emit the heat, right? Face packs, maybe you could say, all right, well, a face pack doesn't need airflow because it's an internal chemical reaction. Regardless, the animal's got to breathe, and even though reptiles require a lower oxygen level, you'll never know how long it's going to be put in this taped up box. We're paying for overnight shipping, priority. But several animals did not go overnight. The last animal I shipped to my customer went to a FedEx hub that just closed all of a sudden. So then the snake got pushed around and pushed around. Thank God Morph Market helped me out and we got the animal there, but that animal was delayed for 3 days. So if I didn't put air holes in my box, does the box sealed off hold 3 days worth of oxygen? And is that a gamble we're willing to take? I don't think the time it takes to put air holes to give our animal a little bit more airflow and a cleaner exit and entry point for oxygen and CO2 exchange is a hill worth dying on. And we should just agree that it's what's best for the animal. And that's what we should do. Alright? So we're going to leave that one alone. The next thing I do is you got to put some kind of bed in there. Some kind of cushion for the animal, right? You're not just going to put your animal in a bag and then stick it in the box. I use this stuff because my wife likes pretty stuff. She probably bought it on sale, so I got a whole closet full. And it matches our favorite colors. Right? So I put enough on the bottom. Just kind of like that. Alright? The next thing you need to figure out, regardless of what shipping company you're using, is whether or not you're going to require a heat pack, a face pack, or a cold pack, which unfortunately I don't have because instead of cold packs I just prefer to use a face pack because this you can heat it or you can cool it and it does both. So I prefer the face pack even though yes it is more expensive, but again I'll spend the money, right? And most of my snakes come with free shipping unless it's an auction. I'll eat the cost for the safety of the animal because the face pack to me is better than a cold pack. So temperature guidelines. Most of the companies agree and they're real close to each other. I think between Redline and reptiles to you, there's like a 3-degree difference on recommendations. And then morph market and ship your ship your reptiles, I think they have like a 5-degree difference, right, on the high end of their recommendations, but they're all pretty close. Okay, so 38 degrees from Redline, it says you don't ship, right? It is not recommended to ship at 38 or below. I have heard of experienced breeders saying that there's extra stuff you can do to the box to ship in those weathers. I've never had anybody ship to me at that temperature, so I wouldn't know. I just don't do it. I'm from Texas. Rarely it gets that cold, but when I buy, most people will hold. Alright, the big thing, heat pack. There are studies, and I think, I know for a fact, on Redline, they have a huge statement on heating, where it is the #1 cause for death of animals, right? The #1 thing that turns your shipping box into a casket is the overuse of heat packs. Everybody wants to use a heat pack for every single shipment, and that is not the way you do it. The only time you put a heat pack is if the daytime high temperatures. That's the other temperature I need you to check when you're checking your temperatures. It's the daytime high temperature at the location, the hub that it's going to go to, and the start end point and the hub. Daytime high temps is what you should be going off of. So anything between 38 to 69 degrees, you're going to use a heat pack. So hopefully all 3 of your locations are within those zones and you don't have anything to question. You're just going to use your heat pack. Alright, 70 to 91 degrees. And remember, each company is like, we're talking a few degrees difference here. 70 to 91 degrees does not require a heat pack, nor does it require a cold pack. Okay? My suggestion, make sure you got your air hose and ship your animal. Okay? But you don't need heat or you don't need cold. Using a heat pack in those temperatures is what's going to overheat your animal. Right? I'm from Texas, so the issue we run into a lot here is 80 to 90 degrees. Should be hub only. Alright? Not only should you be shipping it to your hub, but you should need to find out what time your hub closes. You need to know how long it takes you to get to your hub, and you should be getting it there as late as possible. So for us, that's 5:30, our hub closes. So if my wife's dropping it off or I'm dropping it off, we try to get there like 5:15 to drop off our animals when we're at that temperature, which is very common in Texas. The last thing about temperatures, sometimes I know for us, again, because I'm in Texas and we just have really hot weather, we get a lot of times where it's really hot in Texas. We'll be like in the 80s, and then I'm shipping somewhere that's like, 65 or below, right? Again, that's why I have tons of these, right? I have a lot of face packs. So when your temperatures straddle, right? So let's say it's hot on my end and cold to where it's going, I use face packs, right? If it's super hot, I'll put it in the refrigerator just for a little bit so that it can cool the box off while it's in Texas and on its way to the hub. And then if it's cold to where it gets, then this can release heat. If it's not that hot, then I don't do anything. And I just put this in at room temperature, right? And this will slowly absorb the heat in Texas in all the hot locations. And then when it gets to where it's going, where it's cooler, it will slowly release heat. And it'll maintain the box at 72. Again, that's why these do have way more expensive than these. But they're better. And depending on where you're at, if you live in a hot state, then these are you probably know about these or you'll get used to using these. Okay. Other last thing on the heat pack that I forgot to mention. Open it an hour to 2 hours early and wrap it in a paper towel, and then you can just follow your directions on here. And make sure you secure it nice and tight to your lid. In our bag, what we do is we put paper towel inside, 1 or 2 paper towels. And we're not going to use the snake I'm shipping, but we're going to use we'll use our mean guy. Maybe it'll calm him down. Alright, so we get our boy and we put him in our bag. Here's something that I see some people do. I've had these come to me multiple ways. when I got my boy in there, I was gonna give him a little turn, nice and slow, right? I pull my string and then I wrap down right above him. And then I just make a very loose knot. I don't need my customer over there having to fight a knot. So I tie a nice little knot and I just wrap it a couple of times. I usually prefer doing it with him on the ground. Okay, I tie my knot here. I still make sure that there's enough room so that when he gets where he's going, they can pinch the bag and untie it. Okay, the second thing I do, and this is why I see some people with your zip tie. And again, this is my recommendation. I've gotten it a lot of times where the zip tie is below the knot. Or there's no knot and there's just a zip tie all the way down on the bag. The thing with putting it down here that I feel, and again, my opinion, right, is now I gotta cut this with scissors, a razor blade, or a knife, and that's really close to my animal, right? So the zip tie is in case the knot, what I use zip ties for is, God forbid my knot comes undone, I don't want the snake to get out of the bag and then just be all over the box. If I have a heat pack, he can hurt himself. If I have the face pack, he can get too cold. So we put our zip tie above our knot. And we tied it like that. So now when it gets there to our customer, or when it gets to his new home, they could just squeeze, untie, and then cut. Right? Or cut the zip tie and then untie this. There's no way they're not gonna hurt. They can't hurt their snake, right? Because look how high my zip tie is. So they could just cut the zip tie, untie, and then safely pull their new baby out of their bag. Alright, and then that's the last thing we do. We would put them in there, and then we would cover them up with some more, whatever you use to cover your snake up. Alright, you don't have to use this stuff. There's plenty of stuff that you could use. I have one guy, I buy a lot of snakes from him. I really like what he does. He uses like pillow stuffing. So I'm assuming he buys like brand new cotton pillow stuffing, and he puts his animals in that, and I love that. So I don't know where to get that or how to get it, but you know, that's one thing I've seen. Another thing I've seen is like newspapers. I've seen printless paper. Just anything to make a padding on the bottom and on the top of your snake. Again, because if you're going to use a heat pad, you need something, a barrier in between your animal and the bag. Alright, the last thing we do is we put our lids on. And then for us, because we're a small breeder and we have the time, we always add a hand note. I put my business card in there. I always give whoever buys from us, they get our personal cell phone numbers in case they ever have any questions and they need to reach out. And then our stickers. And then we just zip up. We're going to lock it up. And then you'll attach your FedEx shipping label. I'm not going to put the label in here because I don't know how to black it all out. And I'm not going to give out my customers' addresses, right? I'll not do all that. Alright, so that's shipping in a nutshell. That's how we do it. That's what we recommend. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comments. I'm more than happy to explain something. If maybe I didn't explain it good enough or something wasn't clear, please let us know, right? If you disagree with anything, or you have a different point of view, then let us know and let's have a conversation about it. Okay, like I said before, we all don't need to agree on everything. That's fine. None of it, we're not always going to agree. But if we can have conversations that increase the care and reduce the stress that we give to our animals, then those are conversations worth having. I believe that shipping can be alone is stressful for our animals. Anything we could do to reduce that stress. Something as simple as putting holes in our box, right? That takes a couple of seconds. If it increases the oxygen delivery of the box and makes our animal a little bit more comfortable, I just don't think that's a hill worth dying on as far as, it don't need the holes in the box, right? If shipping is already stressful and then we're limiting the oxygen because we believe that our reptiles don't require as much oxygen and we're just adding to the stress, I don't see it, right? If you're not putting holes in the box and the argument that you want to make is that you're maintaining some type of temperature barrier, then my honest opinion is please check your shipper's shipping guidelines, right? And if you're not putting hose because you need to maintain a temperature gradient within your box, and the only way to do that is by not putting hose, then odds are you're probably shipping outside of the guidelines and standards outlined by all 4 shipping companies. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I would think, right? If the temperatures are so extreme that you can't put holes in the box, you're probably shipping outside of those temperature guidelines. So please, just consider putting holes in the box and reducing the stress of your animal. I believe like humans, we all know I can't point to a specific research in ball python that's going to tell you that stress has long-term effects on them, but there are studies that show that high levels of stress does have lasting effects on different types of reptiles, right? It happens in humans. We all know it happens to human bodies when we're under extended periods of stress. So anything we could do to relieve that stress, I believe we should just agree we should take those extra steps, right? Making sure we're shipping during the right temperature zones, making sure we're using heat packs, phase packs, cold packs appropriately, right? Making sure our boxes are nice and secure, and make sure we're shipping to hubs at every chance we have possible, and limiting home deliveries. I do home deliveries under certain weather conditions, and because everybody knows with FedEx there is a lot of hubs that are getting shut down. My last snake I shipped to my customer, he's 2.5 hours away from a hub. So I made an exception because the weather was beautiful all the way around. Alright, thank you for watching. Again, let me know what you think in the comments, or if you have any questions or you don't agree with this, I'd love to have a conversation with you, and maybe we can learn from each other and make advancements together. Alright, thank you for watching, and until next time, stay strong, stay focused, stay committed.